Snyder, round two for the month of January, and very happy 2026 to you all. Before we get into just a few quick announcements, we have a cool game submitted by someone at the club. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to OK.
Yeah. Hello, everybody, and happy 2026 to you all. We have a game which occurred actually in Duluth as part of the Twin Ports Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial Tournament. We've been holding it for, well, almost 20 years now. And so this version just started last week. And here's a game, a feature game from the first round. And it's between Alex Musselman and Gavin Lati. So it started off as a closed Sicilian. And I'm never really great with the nomenclature of these Sicilian variations. When is it a closed versus when is it a Grand Prix? Not always clear on that myself. But I think this is considered a closed Sicilian. And so both sides are developing their pieces. Black is preparing his counter-strike in the center, but is also focusing on getting his pieces developed. And White's got most of his minor pieces into play. The bishop on c1 is the only one who isn't there yet. But a lot of times that bishop is well developed on c1. So White is already gaining space. He has a bit of a space advantage at the center and is looking to gain some space on the king side too. And so Black, as of this move, has completed his minor piece development and is looking for a plan and decides to go with the idea of maybe some play on the queen side with a6. So rook b1 happens, which looks like it's intending to support a b4 advance. And maybe this is a bit dilatory because initially it looked as if White was playing for a king side attack, and now he's playing this move on the queen side. We'll see what his further plan is. So queen c7 happens, and then king h2. And now Black is finally putting a pawn on one of the four central squares. Bishop d2. White completes his development.
I might want to make a quick point here. So to me, it's and I don't play this system as White, so I'm not an expert or anything, but like just g3 king h2, well, I should say h3 king h2. Like I know it's a somewhat common plan, but to me, he should have played bishop d2 sooner, because it eventually became apparent that you're either going to put your bishop on d2 or e3. You know, you can't fianchetto it, or you just hang your knight. And if you play bishop e3, it doesn't look as good because Black's going to play d4 like they did in the game, and then if you don't do anything, they're going to fork you with d4. And if you take their pawn, you're only opening up their light squared bishop on b7. So I think that kind of makes the only square for the bishop d2. So I think he just should have Gavin should have played it sooner.
Yes. So I think Alex is playing White here. No, sorry, Gavin is playing White. No, so this is actually, if you go back a bit, so at this moment here, maybe there's an argument for a3. I'm not so sure about that. But after bishop b7, going back even to here, you know, this concept of play of, at least in the opening, doing what you have to do before doing what you want to do. And around here, Gavin is taking certain liberties. Now he's got a space advantage. He's already developed, so maybe he's playing the white pieces, which gives him an extra move. So maybe he can afford to be a bit loose with his tempi. But h3, a6, rook b1 also seems as if it wasn't really necessary. If the idea is to get the bishop to d2, he could have done it right here as well, along with what you were saying, Michael, right? He just play bishop d2 here, because you know that's where it's going to be eventually. And in fact, as it is here, if you do intend to play b4, now you're almost ready to play it. Maybe play rook b1 first. But I think in terms of playing in a systematic way, maybe you prioritize the minor pieces first before you start playing pawn moves that might end up not only being unnecessary, but weakening. So, yeah, I think bishop d2 could have happened a lot earlier. And now we have this position where the knight takes on e4. What do you think about the choices here? Knight takes e4 or pawn takes e4?
It's a good question. Probably knight takes. I feel like that pawn is a little bit of a target.
Yes.
And it does just open it up for black's work. Yeah, so I like knight takes.
Yeah, knight takes I think is good. And knight takes also has the hidden advantage that if black tries for b5, b4, for one, there is no knight to hit on c3. And for two, it's actually slowing down a b5 advance because of knight takes c5. So if, for example, if black tries this immediately, then this is en prise. So knight takes e4 seems okay. Now, what are the downsides? Maybe black's knight has access to f5 and d5, and he chooses to go with knight f5, to which Gavin plays queen e2. And here. And now, in some way, white is paying for using his time for moves that weren't completely necessary. And now black is already fully mobilized and is now starting to make some threats. And so I think at this point, I would definitely prefer to be behind the black pieces.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And yeah, if you stop right now and just compare both positions, black's king is a little bit better placed. White's king isn't in danger at the moment, but having it vis-a-vis the queen on c7 is probably not the healthiest. Black has a piece already crossing the border into white's position. Granted, it could be pushed back with, say, a pawn moves to c3, but then that then weakens. So say if after this, for example, if this were to happen and the knight runs back, this guy becomes weak. So even though the knight isn't, even though d4 isn't absolutely weak, it's difficult for white to repel that knight. And that actually points to some of the goodness in rook ad8. In other words, black is sort of anticipating that if you try to kick my knight out, you'll have to pay for that with the weak d3 pawn.
Yeah. No, black's just, he has more space, better pieces. White was just a bit too slow.
Yes.
But I mean, it's there's still a long way to go in the game. White hasn't lost, but his pieces are just more confined.
Yes. His pieces aren't the happiest, for sure.
No.
And so this is a clever idea with so b4, white is trying to create some play on the queen side, and black plays c4, which on one hand means that white isn't going to get an open b file, and on the other hand is attacking the d3 pawn. If it happens that white plays d takes c4, then after queen takes c4, there's a backward pawn on an open file. The path is opened up for potential tactics down the d file, and the knight on e4 is a little bit shaky now. It's I mean, I didn't coin the term, but the concept, but the knight on e4 is sort of under defended, right? And by under defended means it's attacked just as many times as it's defended. So it's got one attacker here, one attacker here. Oh, sorry, one defender here. But then there's also a latent attacker here with the queen, so that this knight might be a little bit unsafe if d takes c4 to happen. So white, under the circumstances, decides, well, I have a number of bad choices. I should take one, and plays c3 to try and kick the knight out. And this kind of works in his favor a little bit, because we were talking about, I mentioned that if c3 is played, then d3 might become weak on a semi-open file. And now with this sequence, white is able to get the pawn to d4. He's not out of the woods yet, and that structure in the center seems a bit iffy. But at least the worst is over for now, and white can try and hopefully create some play.
Yeah, no, he's made progress over the last couple moves, because black shouldn't have played c4, precisely because it allows d4.
Exactly. So, and that's after all the praise I give to c4. But there's always there's very rarely do you get a free lunch in chess. Almost every move you make has good sides and bad sides, right? Now, black was not terribly pleased that white is getting a decent position and lashes out with e5. And they just might be right.
Yeah, this requires calculation.
Yes.
And I speak when we're commentating and we need to figure this out on the fly.
No. Now, one easy one to see is that the d pawn probably has no business capturing because of knight e3.
Yeah.
So let's spend time looking at this.
But I would comment, in a bullet game, you could consider doing that and getting the rook, knight, and pawn for the queen.
Yes.
And then you have a nice outpost on d6 for your knight. Like in a bullet game, that's playable.
Yes. The rules are very different for a bullet game. So yes, after here, then maybe this would happen, and here. And I'm assuming this guy, right? Yeah, and the knight comes to d6, and white has compensation for the small. In fact, it's not even much of a material advantage, right?
It's just an imbalance.
Yes, it's an imbalance. So that might have been something for Gavin to think about. Instead, he plays f takes e5, and I guess we'll find out what Alex's plan was. So he plays knight takes, bishop takes, and rook takes. So for the piece, he currently has one pawn, but he has threats, and the threats aren't trivial to deal with. So, for one, he's currently threatening the bishop on e4, and he's also threatening to play c3, which would win back the bishop on d2. So now White has to make a decision and chooses the sensible queen c2 with the idea, okay, we're defending the bishop on e4, and we're taking our queen off the d file, so there's no pin, and now c3 has been defanged. Unfortunately for White, Black has another capture, which is bishop takes e5, which also has a threat attached to it, being bishop g3. And now so far the count is 2 pawns for the piece, so roughly a pawn deficit, but he has threats, and White's pieces aren't really pulling their weight at the moment. So bishop f4, blocking the attack on g3, and Alex plays rook fd8, which follows on the principle we've discussed a couple of times about when there's tension like this, if possible, if you don't gain an immediate advantage from starting the exchange yourself, wait and let your opponent do the exchanging, because you can probably get other important things done in the meantime. So in this situation, Black is playing rook d8, which, by the way, is threatening rook d2 check, which would be pretty painful. So Gavin plays bishop takes first, so he doesn't have to deal with that threat, and then brings his bishop back. Maybe
yeah, why didn't he throw in rook d2 check first?
Yeah, I'm wondering about that. That rook d2 check would be very painful, I think. Now, let's see.
It could
maybe his idea.
Well, no, not really, because yeah, I mean, I don't know.
Maybe his idea is that.
So now it's harder to defend
queen
g3.
takes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And our queen's being hit.
Yep.
Yeah, this looks lost.
So then, yeah, there's no way to defend this queen and g3 at the same time, as far as I can tell. So I think that here, rook d2 check. And actually, this is a destructive moment too, because we all get into the habit of playing moves automatically rather than looking at every single move as a decision point. So, well, he took my bishop, so I need to take it back, is the way our mind would process this, which is, I dare say, a lazy way of processing it. Instead, you should say, okay, he's taken this. This is a puzzle rush position. What do I do? You look for checks, captures, and threats first before you do anything else. And oh, my queen's attacked. Yeah, but you've got the move. And if you check him, huh?
So sorry to interrupt, but I actually think this does win. So if rook d2, instead, if we go back, so after bishop takes e5.
Yeah.
So I thought, okay, rook d2, we calculated king g1 doesn't work, right? But, and okay, bishop g2, it looks like it might transpose. But now don't we play queen either b7 or c6? And now we're threatening the queen and checkmate.
Yeah. No, this position is just this position.
Yeah, it took me a while to realize it, but this just lost. Yeah.
Yeah, the position after rook d2 is just lost. Yeah, after bishop e5, rook d2 is just winning, as far as I can tell.
Yeah.
So yeah, but yeah, just as a general thing that, and I fall into the same trap often. In fact, I've had a really bad run playing Blitz the last few days, based on automatic thinking. Just okay, as they used to say, playing with hand, not with brain. Yeah. So here you play with brain, and you're giving rook d2 check first because he has to answer that, and then you can capture, and all of a sudden, white's position's untenable. So let's see though. Let's see how things go. So queen takes, bishop here, and rook d3 is played. Now let's see. Is it possible to play rook d2 here? Oh, rook d3 is fine, I guess. So rook d3, capture, capture, and there. And now, even though nominally white is ahead of material, on the list of priorities of the game, king safety is way, way higher than material count. And so he has to figure out how to keep his king safe and also not become completely passive. So white has a hard task in front of him that I can tell.
I think it looks scarier than it actually is.
Yeah. I mean, it's so normally in these positions, white has a resource. Normally in these sort of positions, white will have a resource. The problem is we're human, and so we're going to see the threat as a lot stronger than execution. Hence, Aaron Nimzovich's important principle. And we tend to see ghosts where the engines will just say, "Nah, y'all are just lazy, don't want to calculate, and this is just drawn." But as a human defender, it's hard to see the position for what it is and hold on. It's too easy. It's easier to make a mistake, I suppose, as a defender than as an attacker here. But that said, I think white should be able to hold. I don't know about this position here. It seems like white's almost on the verge of getting a decent position here. Black plays rook d5, which looks like it's attempting to keep queen e5 from being a thing. Exchanging of queens. And so white comes back with rook e3. And actually, it almost looks like white's on the verge of completely consolidating his position. I'm not a huge fan of that one. Maybe rook f3. Queen b2 maybe. But queen f3 was played, which has its own sense behind it. Basically, we're offering an exchange of queens while also attacking the rook on d5, and so black has to respond. And black responds with queen d6. He does definitely in these sort of positions, you're not wanting to exchange off pieces as black. You need to keep your pieces on board to create some threats. Otherwise, white should be doing okay with their slight material advantage. And here, bishop c4 seems like it's sensible because you're trying to get an X-ray attack against f7, but it overlooks the fact that black can defend f7 and attack the queen with rook f5.
Yeah, I just liked rook d3. I mean, you're up a bishop. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a bishop for 2 pawns, but there's pawns on both sides. You should win the game. So yeah, I just
Yes.
like rook d3 as well.
No more complication. Just exchange off. I mean, yes, it's possible that black can hold, but he needs to be an endgame Superman in order to do so.
Yeah.
And I don't know that anybody on the stream is an endgame Superman. So white has really good winning chances if rook d3 is played. And the principle is you're ahead of material, exchange of pieces. It's important, though, especially as you're getting to the endgame, that if you're ahead of material, you exchange of pieces and not pawns, because the pawns are what are really your advantage in these kinds of positions. So rook d3, and I dare say that's an offer that black really can't fully refuse, right? The rook must be exchanged, and then it's now queen and bishop versus queen. So after bishop c4, queen f5 happens, and so white still has to contend with swindling chances by black here. Yeah, I can see how this position could easily generate an accident. So, for example, just off the bat, bishop e4 is probably not working because of rook here. The king has to come up, or should consider coming up, and then you pin. Which, granted, is not automatically losing, but definitely turns the position around where white is the one fighting for a draw.
Yeah.
And now white plays king f1, I believe, with the idea of avoiding a perpetual, maybe. The problem, though, is the queen has access to f6, which means the queen can come into the queen side. And when the king comes over heading towards the queen side, it might have a welcoming party from black's queen. Unless he can do this, which blocks the check from one side, but still allows the queen to come in from behind. And already things are pretty much lost. Wow, all of this is so. I like to joke. I like to joke about when ahead of material, you do your best to reduce your opponent's ability to wage effective warfare, which rook d3 does right away, right? Without that rook on the board, without black, if black is forced to give up his rook, his chances of saving the position are reduced significantly. By allowing the rook to live, that gives black at least a puncher's chance of doing something. And he makes the best of his opportunity after this. Because now you have this check, and here, and all of a sudden, white is completely lost. If he tries to come up with his king, that's a checkmate. And so the only other legal, well, there are two other legal moves. There's bishop b1, which I hope we don't have to look at too long. And then there's queen here. And now a very nice nice trick common in these sort of positions, rook g1, and all of a sudden, black is psychologically turning the position around, but also materially, he might end up a little bit ahead, like a lot ahead, because now it's like queen versus rook and bishop, but he still has the 2 extra pawns. That said, it's not an automatic win. Black has to show the right combination of aggression and caution, because you don't want to let white get back in the game. So bishop blocks and a5, which I think is a very nice move. In principle, basically, white his bishop is pinned down, so his bishop can't contribute to attacking b5 really at the moment. And black is trying to open up the position for his queen. His queen needs open lines. So a5 is helping to create some openness on the queen side. And then maybe he'll turn back to the king side and start pushing his passed pawns there.
Yeah, I just think that 3-on-1 is just going to be pretty devastating for white.
Yes. Yep.
And this game is kind of like it's kind of summarized it. It seems like white was a bit too slow, kind of like we mentioned in the opening. They played those flank pawn moves with the A and H pawns instead of developing the bishop sooner, which allowed black all of the pins on the D file. And then, but then black, they had a slight advantage, but they slightly over pushed it and were probably a bit too eager with the C4 move, and that allowed white to free up. So then that was kind of like one turning point of the game where it kind of turned back in maybe slightly white's favor or about equal. And then once black noticed that they throw away their advantage, they decided to sack everything on d4. And that was the other turning point. And ultimately it didn't work. But then obviously black made the last blunder. So kind of in summary, there's like a topsy-turvy game with kind of a lot of learning points for both players.
Yes, quite right. It was an interesting fight. And I think for me, the most interesting moment might have been where black burned his bridges with e5, right? And then just bang, bang, tried to make the position a mess. And whether it's objectively correct isn't as important as the fact that it helped induce white into making an error. And I think psychologically, white never fully was never fully balanced after that, because he's now dealing with threats here and there. And even after seemingly objectively getting a decent position, and again, I'm not sure, because it's hard to divine what's going on in a player's mind, whether he looked at rook d3 at that moment that you mentioned and decided not to go for it, or what. But I think rook d3 was his last real chance to keep the position under control. And now, this is very difficult. And I think that Gavin simply didn't notice the threat at this position, which is the simple checkmate with g3. It's not always the most easy thing to notice that a measly little pawn is coming to do harm to your king. But yeah, it was an interesting fight, I think. And I think for Gavin, it's important in the opening, don't focus on what you have to do before you do what you want to do. And what he had to do was get all his pieces developed. And if you are going to consider playing a pawn move in the opening, make sure the pawn move is necessary and not just desirable.
Yeah.
I think that's maybe the one major take home from that.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, that was a fun game to go over.
Yeah. Well, I
Let's
think
see.
it
Yeah.
looks like um it seems Eddie is working on the getting the games for round 2 up. They
Oh,
were
okay.
not they weren't being broadcasted, so but it looks like Eddie's working on it now. So we're seeing progress. We can now see the players' names, which 20 minutes ago, 5 minutes ago, we couldn't. So that's improvement. But
Yes.
in the meantime, we kind of wanted to mention that the Twin Sports Chess Club is running their annual Martin Luther King tournament. It's the 21st edition, and it's been a local tradition in Duluth since 2005, and it runs the whole month of January. So if you're in the area or you're a chess addict and you want to travel there, then make sure to check that out. And because we've been off a couple weeks, I did want to mention just kind of some of the results. So the December Thursday nighter in the premier section, it ended up being a tie, a three-way tie between Jordan, Tim, Dane Zagar, and Eddie, which is not a surprise at all. Those are classic winners. They all
Yes.
finished on 3 out of 4. Because interestingly enough, there's only 4 Wednesdays in December because the just missed out with the first being January 1st, a
Oh,
Thursday. So, but congrats to them. And then notable performance from Noah Stewart. He actually did beat Nate in the last round, and I heard that
oh,
Noah crossed, yeah, and he crossed 1800. So, big congrats to Noah
nice.
there. And then for the open section, we had John Baker winning by a mile. He got 3.5 out of 4, and in second place we had like 6 players. So congrats to John Baker. And then getting into, I guess before I mention that, um, the other couple tournaments we wanted to mention was the Scholastic Grand Prix. I believe it's round 2, second
Oh,
second round because they had one in December, but round 2 is coming up. Let's see, I had the page open. It's here on the 11th. So, in just this Sunday, it'll be round 2. Obviously, only for Scholastic players, 18 and under, but just some games in Sunday afternoon. I believe it's 4 rounds. So make sure to check out the flyer. Make sure to check out the posting on the Castle homepage, and you can see all the details there. But really cool to see that event for the Scholastic age players, and it looks like there's some good cash prizes too. But that's kind of like a season long event. They run it through December through, I believe it's May. But
okay.
cool to see. And then the last one was there's an exerciser quad this Saturday at the castle. So the classic 3 rounds of game 60 plus 30. So check that out as well if you're looking for some action on the weekend. And then getting up to date after all the catch up, we had round 1 last week. They did play. They played on, I believe it was, I think, no, I think they did play on Thursday. I don't remember exactly, but the only winners, it looks like kind of a smaller field this month. We had Jordan and Nate winning. And if we're deducing, it looks like they beat Eddie and Torfy. So only players on a perfect score in the Premier are Jordan and Nate. And the only players on a perfect score in the Open are Nate and Jeremy and Norman Myron. So
Yep.
yeah.
Oh, well, maybe we'll, until we get the broadcast of the round 2 games, maybe we'll do a run through of the round 1 games and see what they look like.
Yeah.
If that sounds fair.
That sounds a great idea.
So I got Jordan versus Eddie, and okay, got another Sicilian. This time an open Sicilian. Wait a second. Jordan didn't start with D4.
You're kidding. Oh wow, you're right. Wow, that's a shocker.
Yeah, that's
It's not April. It's not April Fool's Day, huh?
so maybe this is maybe this is a portent of things to come. We'll see.
The new and improved Jordan. It's a new year. He's testing out new openings.
Yes. So so we got the infamous Najdorf variation on the board, and Jordan goes for the aggressive English attack and responds with knight f3. I think the knight can also retreat to b3, but f3 has a good reputation. Bishop e7, continuing his development, and then white plays bishop c4, so he's trying to put as much influence on d5 as possible. Bishop e6, challenging the opponent's bishop, and also making his claim to pressure on d5. And white plays bishop e3, so he wants to continue keeping pressure on d5. Doesn't want to exchange because that would actually strengthen. I mean, yeah, it creates double pawns on the e file, but those are not weak double pawns for black in this position. He'll be happy that the knight on c3 no longer has d5 available to it. So after bishop b3, black wisely continues his development, castles, and knight c6. And so so here we have some maneuvering to do. Queen e2 happens. The idea being taking the queen off the d file to allow one of the rooks to get to the d file. And after knight a5, so he's looking to capture the bishop on b3 and then claim he has the bishop pair, which is fine, but white also has time to get his rook onto the d file. So it's not clear to me who is necessarily better. I might prefer to play white here just because, not for objective reasons. I just like that black's counterplay is at the moment kept to a minimum. So queen c7 and bishop g5, which is a bit of a thematic idea. The fight, has been on d5, and so bishop g5 is threatening to take one of the defenders of the d5 square at a moment that's appropriate for him. So queen c6, attacking e4, but also putting some influence on d5 himself. And if I may check the database, see how far these guys are in terms of theory. So as of this move, there are quite a few heavy hitters here. There's Gadakamsky, Boris Gelfand.
That's impressive. Wow.
Yeah, there's a game between Jan Nepomniachtchi and Yanis Papiano. Efimenko versus Nair. Quite a few heavy hitters here. Queen c6 is rare. Only one other game in the database involving two strong players, 2389 versus 2243 back in 2019. And then I guess in terms of the database, the first really new move, is knight. Is this knight d5 by Jordan? So in the previous game that featured this position, at this moment, bishop f6 was played, but Jordan comes with knight d5, which I think is just as sensible. And tactically, it's working. So when you have this kind of thing, or I guess I should call it this kind of thing, white should always be careful of tactics like this. But in this case, the bishop is defended by the knight, and more importantly, this forks these two guys, which means there's no time to protect this guy. So after here, Eddie retreats, and Jordan brings his queen back to the E file, sorry, D file, and the same factors existed in the last comment. So Eddie decides he can't tolerate that knight on D5 any longer and exchanges it off. And now knight D4, knight D2. And this definitely requires some calculation, because you have to consider, okay, what happens after knight D5, for example. And
Yeah, because I have to calculate bishop d8 and knight. Well, bishop d8. Then yeah, we have knight f4. I was looking at knight b4, but yeah, knight f4.
B4, yeah, there's knight f4. But then there's queen takes d6. But then there's rook d8. So this would have to take some calculation, I would think. I mean, one possibility here is, I mean, not the possibility, but another possibility is this, and then here, and then maybe here, and then c4. But he's still a pawn down, and he'll get his pawn back. But I'm not that sanguine about white's chances there. So maybe we should look for something better. So if here and knight here,
and actually, if queen takes d6, how about queen g4?
Yep. Yeah, this is there's going to be pain on the board fairly soon.
Yeah, I think this is plenty worth it, even if we're going to be down a pawn or two. Let's say like g3, and then we probably take the bishop, and who cares if they take our e-pawn? We're swarming with all of our pieces. Yeah, I mean, this is... Oh, well, I guess they can take our knight, unfortunately.
Oh, yeah, sorry. So here, and then maybe we play this first, and then after maybe here, then we go here. And this just can't be nice for white. So yeah, actually I wonder, is knight d5 working there?
It's a long line for sure. I still kind of err with the players, but because they played 3 for 14 moves. But that being said, Eddie's just dropped an hour and 10 minutes. He's now at 20 minutes compared to Jordan's 90. So he's definitely not in theory anymore.
And in fact, you know what? Looking at his time consumption, so I said this.
I didn't notice.
Yeah, this here he played. So
he stumbled into every theoretical move.
Yes.
That's what it looks like.
And then bishop d8, sorry, is the first move he's taken a significant amount of time on. And then after queen d3, takes a significant amount of time on bishop takes d5, and then here and there. And so he might have been thinking about knight d5 here, because he spends like 26 minutes on knight d7.
Yeah, he probably did.
He probably did look at it and came to the conclusion it wasn't enough. And so I'm not going to be the one doing rapid fire commentary and saying, "Oh yeah, sure." So he must have looked at it and figured that there's not enough there. But now, unfortunately for him, it looks like white has a freer hand on the queen side, and it's not clear he's going to be able to make much happen on the king side, but maybe he has to start rushing over there with, like, I don't know, queen g5 and a knight f6 or something like this. Rook c8. Okay, so he's trying to slow down c5. And rook ac1 is trying to keep it a thing.
Because Eddie says in the chat, I thought I was worse after knight d5, queen d5. Maybe not losing, but very uncomfortable to play. Poor activity.
Okay. That makes some sense. Let's go back and say so. Knight d5, queen d5, bishop here.
And this was the line we didn't look at, really. At least
I think we just said, okay, so knight here, and he gets his pawn back, but
yeah, I mean, knight c4 is also an option, threatening a fork.
Oh yeah, there's that too.
I don't know. I like this as well. So it's personal preference, but I mean, so I like this for white. So it does make what Eddie says sensible.
Yes. Yeah, because the knight coming into b6 would not be pleasant, and there's no good way to defend the pawn, and
yeah. I wonder how it turned out, though. We should probably catch back up to where
so
you're
let's
at.
see. So we're here, and one problem with b6 is it weakens a6, so that might be a tactical liability later. Not sure if it becomes a factor in this game, but the fight right now is to see if white can enforce c5, and I guess with the pawn on a6 being hanging, it might make c5 more doable. And now it looks like Eddie's like tired of playing passively and wants to get something going on, so he brings his queen out. But that means that the queen side has less defense, and Jordan decides that the moment is right to push with c5. And if he doesn't, I think if he doesn't act as quickly as possible, those E and F pawns might start marching forward. And I don't know, e4, knight e5 can become rather annoying to deal with. So I think strategy-wise, pushing with c5 seems like a definite yes, even if it were to cost material. And in this case, it doesn't cost material because of that hanging a6 pawn. So now the position on the queen side is opening up. Whether that leads to an advantage or not isn't clear yet. But if, for example, Eddie were to capture here, then that's just dropping a rook. So it turns out that c5 is still under pressure and d6 is under pressure. So Eddie has to retreat with queen f6, which from a practical standpoint is good on him that he realized the last move was a mistake, and he's not ashamed to admit, okay, mea culpa, I did wrong. I need to go fix what I broke. Unfortunately, it's kind of a little too late because White's able to liquidate on the queen side in a way that's favorable. And now everything revolves around whether White is able to promote his passed d-pawn. So that attacks the c5 pawn, but also controls d8, making the pawn's promotion even more likely. So Eddie tries to remove his pawn on c5 from attack, but then that allows d7, and there's no good way to stop the promotion on d8.
Yeah, I think queen e6 was a little bit odd in my opinion because you wanted your queen on f6 to stop the promotion square. So I think
Yes.
he could have held on a bit longer, but he was, and the d pawn was pinned at that point anyway. So White had to be careful. But yeah, eventually he probably would have fallen anyways, just because that pass pawn is so strong.
And also, Jordan has a threat at this moment. He's trying to win this guy. So, for example, if rook here, then there's queen check, and then
That must
capture
have
that
been
guy.
his. That's a good point. That must have been his concern, but there has to be some other move than queen e6. Yeah.
And I think that's why Eddie played queen e6 was to avoid queen c4. But the problem is the queen isn't controlling d8 in that situation. So something had to give, it looks like. Ouch.
Maybe it's just another pawn.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Should we move on to Nathan and Torfi?
Yes. Yep. Yeah, that was a clean, relatively clean game. Now let's see what's happening here. So, what? Okay, so now we're having two new moves. Torfi, isn't Torfi mostly an F4 guy?
Yeah, he's a Dutch player, but I guess it's another New Year's resolution.
Yes. Now, I'm not going to pretend to know what's going on here theoretically, but Queen G4 seems
dubious.
Yeah, slightly. Maybe it's book though. Who knows? But it seems as if it's bad book.
Nowadays, everything's book.
Yes. Okay, so White's creating a fairly okay. Is D5 the thing?
Torfi says that Queen G4 is best, so it's a new move for me and you.
Seriously? Okay. Queen G4 is best. Wow.
It's counterintuitive because right, you Black wants to play D6 or D5 at some point, but yeah, you have to guard G7 first.
So what's White getting out of all these maneuvers here? So
just the dark squares, maybe.
Oh, I suppose look at it structurally. White has achieved weaknesses on the dark squares in Black's king side with Black's bishop out on c5. So I guess that does count for something. Okay, looking at it through that lens, I guess it makes some sense. Actually, okay, I'm a check to see how far these intrepid travelers were following theory. So, guess who we see. First of all, this position after Queen G4 and G6 seems to give White overwhelming results.
That's fascinating.
And
yeah.
This is like, and the people who are playing White in this position include such slouches as Hikaru Nakamura, Shakhriyar Mamedyarov, Levon Aronian. I mean, just complete tomato cans of the chess world. Wow, you learn something new every day. Thanks,
Yeah.
Torpy.
Yeah.
Crazy. Okay. So Queen there, and then Knight f6 is the overwhelming favorite. Knight GE2, also overwhelming favorite. But now the sample size has gotten a lot smaller. And then D3. Okay, so D3 is what Hikaru played. Which suggests that maybe Bishop G4 isn't worth preventing. So if D3 is played and Bishop G4, then Queen G3. And this is how the Nakamura game as well as the Mamedyarov game went. And aha, I suppose the idea is by playing D3, since Bishop G4 isn't as huge of a threat, by playing D3, we're also allowing our bishop on C1 to get into the game to take advantage of these weakened dark squares. In anticipation, a lot of the stronger black players play Bishop E6, and then Bishop G5 happens. Okay, so yeah, so that might explain why D3 here is better than H3. There's no need to prevent Bishop G4 because the bishop's going to have to retreat anyway. And meanwhile, with D3, you're continuing your development or here. All right.
And by the way, it looks like
Yeah.
the boards finally got updated for the round 2. So do you want to quickly breeze through the rest of this game, and then that way we at least looked at the results of the 2 winners, and then we can kind of quickly go through the round 2 games.
Yes. So this is, I guess, where I split off around here. So let's see. Already Torphy is facing some difficulties. His bishop on B3 is not great, is lacking moves, and he's also, and now Nate is gaining some space on the king side. H5 looks a bit sus, just because you're allowing the bishop into G5. But probably Nate has assessed this and figured it's worth the discomfort. It's hard to say. Okay, and now it looks like Black is the owner of a very good Ruy Lopez position.
So White's up a pawn. Wait, no, they're not up a pawn, but they have a bit more space in the center.
They have a bit more space in the center. They're trying to create play, but they're also leaving their B2 pawn on priest for the moment.
Yeah.
Okay. So black has a small advantage, I think. His pieces suggest making a little bit more sense. I mean, that rook on c2 is I don't know what language rooks speak, but I'm sure if it spoke English, it would say I'm miserable because it doesn't have any good squares right now.
And they say that the side that has what the pawn breaks is, what's the famous quote, like no pawn break, no plan or something?
Yes, no lead or no plan.
Yeah, and it looks like black's the only one who can pawn break. Like I just want to see them play g5, g4, and I mean I don't even really like rook f8. I wanted to just leave my rook there. Like why are we trading pieces? I think
Yeah.
black has better pieces and we want to use them for an attack. So if we play g5, g4, that looks appealing.
Although maybe his idea is that if he exchanges off a rook, so in principle, he's material up right now because that rook on c2 is kind of really bad. So maybe his idea is, well, if I have 25 to 20, the advantage of 20 to 15 is even bigger. If I exchange off a pair of rooks, my rook is going to dominate, my remaining rook is going to dominate his rook even more. Might be his thinking. Because yeah, that rook is in bad shape, and I think now I don't know how far Nate calculated this, but it seems like everything is well timed here. Everything is falling with just the right amount of tempo. And now the rook comes in, and all of a sudden you have a classic case of bullying. 1, 2, 3, 4, facing in this direction, and uno, dos, tres, staring at their navels. Sorry, that's harsh, but it's and it's not. I don't think Torfi. I don't think Torfi was, planning to get his piece misplaced like this, but it just so happened that the way the position developed after, like around here, maybe a little bit earlier than here, when exchanges happened, where I mentioned that black had a better side of a Lopez. He just has more usable space. Even though white had more central space, his pieces just weren't making as much sense. And then after he started losing material here, and the attack comes, and yeah. And that's all she wrote.
Wow. Pretty game from Nate. He
Yeah.
overcame the slightly unfavorable opening by GM standards and proved that you can win as black in this line.
Yes. And I think the key thing for all of us, because I've never seen this particular sequence, but here, just in terms of opening principles, D3 is the move that the cool kids play. Well, the stronger kids play is D3 with the idea of getting that bishop in. And actually, there's a link to the one game between Gavin and Alex, right? Where if you're going to play a pawn move, make sure it's necessary and not just desirable. So H3 is desirable. You don't want to allow the bishop to G4, but it's not necessary because the bishop coming to G4 really isn't a thing, at least according to the big boys. So yeah. All right. Well, let's see what this week has brought in. We have Nate versus Jordan. Center game.
A lot of interesting openings today.
Yeah. So this opening is very trappy. A friend of mine used to play this almost exclusively as white against at e4, e5. And there are a whole bunch of tricks and traps, and I think once again I'm going to avail myself of the database to see what the strongest players are playing. There's a game here, so Jan Nepomniachtchi is a fan of this opening, apparently.
A rook on b4 on move 10. What is this?
So I decided to stop because I'm thinking, look at this position. This is how do you even assess this thing? By the way, let me see. So I mentioned there was an Nepomniachtchi game against Vallejo Pawns, and he also played against the strong Alexander Raitsky here. And Bishop b4 is not the most common move here. So c3 is the most common move, but interestingly, c3 is the most common move, and c3 seems to perform a lot worse than what Nate played. This bishop b4. Again, the sample size is really small, so the statistics probably aren't that important. And then after rook b4, both games that reached this point against master strength players continued with a3. So knight f3 is the first new move here. And we'll see as the game goes on whether a3 makes a difference or not.
These guys are both masters. We got to get this game in the database. Update it.
Yes. There you go. So yeah, we'll see if this makes a big difference, this a3 versus c3. Yikes. Is that legal?
The pin's very annoying for black, but yeah, white's queen is pretty horribly placed, so.
Yeah, this is
and black's technically up a pawn.
Yeah, black's technically up a pawn, but he's also up position, and at least as regards white's queen position.
Yeah, and it should be a position, especially after c5, where the bishop's better than the knight.
Yes. The only thing is, how do you break that pin in a comfortable manner? Wait a second. Did he just give up a... Oh, okay. So rook is going there. Oh, that's clever. So Jordan looks like he's trying to play rook b5, which then means the rook on a to b5, which means that the rook on b8 would be defended, allowing the bishop to get into the game. So that's an interesting maneuver.
So he was feeling the pressure, so he took drastic measures.
Yes. I'm wondering, but I think he might not have had too much of a choice. Say he tries to counterattack with this, then this is still doable because he can afford. How did everything move?
I don't know what happened, but
so Well, okay, he goes here and then there, and rook there, and bishop queen there, and oh, okay, he's winning a piece. Got it. So we rushed over that. But yeah, rook going down to the 7th isn't enough, and I guess there's no really good way to defend the b2 pawn. So white decides to counterattack using this sequence and gains the f7 pawn, but it's a little bit late, and I think f4 might not have been the most circumspect. Maybe queen d1, maybe
yeah, what if queen f1? And then if rook c b8, then we play queen c4. Maybe he has d5. Or that check, never mind. That's checkmate.
but it's not done yet. Oh yeah, it is done. Because whenever the king goes up, then rook b2. And it should be pretty quickly done after that. Yeah. So yeah, it seems as if black's position is already winning. So f4 might not have made too much difference, but it does seem as if it made it a bit easier. Because then after here, the only way to defend the pawn is b4, and unfortunately for Nate, that leaves rook takes g5 a thing, and the g5 knight was performing an important duty defending this bloke. So then if normal continuation here and here, then black has a rook up for pretty much nothing.
Yeah. I think if I had to give like a summary of this game, it kind of seemed like, at least a quick summary, like a 30-second summary, like in the opening or / middle game, white had the annoying pin on the bishop right, but then black kind of was forcing white's queen into no man's land. So that kind of seems somewhat balancing each other out. But then black had thanks to the double T pawns, black had the open B file. And in opposite sides castling, you always need to look at how can I attack the other king. And white's counterattack was pretty much never there. So I think that was the deciding factor, was even though it's a little bit innocuous, if that's the right word. I think that's what innocuous. I think that's what won the game for Jordan, was just a better an easier attack on the queen side.
Yes. And yeah, and you know, if you go back to the middle game position, so around here, so after the rook gets down there to the back rank, and you have that pin against the queen, against the rook, at this moment, yeah, black's rook on a8 is not really helping, but that's 5 points disabled versus 9 points disabled. Yeah, I think that counts for something.
Good point.
So, and yeah, Jordan just very skillfully, I feel, found a way to coordinate his pieces. This maneuver with rook a4, rook a5, rook b5, I think was just the stuff of a chef's kiss, so to speak. I don't know if there's any way what would be the best way for white to improve here, if there's a way.
A3 doesn't seem wrong off the bat. I mean, like, you don't really have any other options to protect that pawn, because king b1, there's bishop f5.
Yeah.
And that you don't want to allow that.
Maybe at this moment, no, it's still not working though. I think maybe you could get the queen somewhere. Oh, maybe there's knight d2.
Yeah, knight d2 or queen d1, I think, might be playable.
Yeah, but the 92 isn't as strong because d5 is still coming. So let's see. So yeah, maybe queen d1, then rook b5.
True. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a difficult position for white to hold, and Jordan just got done with the business. So okay, let's go to second game. So we got John Heyer versus Michael Muff, and see how this one started. If we're going to get another e4 e5 edumacation, which seems to be the case. Now we have the Spanish, and bishop c4 is not the most common move. More often than not, bishop b5 is played. Sorry, bishop a4 is played instead of bishop c4. But okay, we kind of have a kind of Gyoko piano, but I would think that a6 would benefit black a little bit compared to the normal Gyoko piano position. But then okay, it's just move 4 in the opening, and there's still a lot of play here. And now we have a weird kind of two knights, I guess.
Right. What on earth is knight g5?
So if you go back, right,
Okay, and Eddie
right.
just informed me that this game is actually between Noah and Robert, not between these two guys. So some of the matchups are a bit off, but at least we do have
Okay.
good games.
Okay.
And just to clarify, who has the white pieces? Okay, Eddie said Robert's white, Noah's black. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, so
And now knight g5 and this whole business makes more sense.
yes. Funny how that works, right? Once you know who the protagonists are, it makes all the sense in the world. So yeah, so they get into this weird. I mean, there's shadows of the two knights in this thing, but yeah, now this is beginning to make a lot of sense, and already maybe Noah's in trouble. Or maybe not, actually.
White should have some counterplay for the pawn.
Yeah, I think white has some compensation for it. I mean, this square is eternally weak. As the knight can probably hang out there or something, or maybe a rook could hang out there. Eventually can get c3 to start chasing black's pieces away. But black is going to castle queenside, and it's not clear if white can comfortably defend a kingside attack. I mean, it's going to take him forever to create, or maybe not. I need to stop thinking like normal chess, because it's not going to take a bunch of time to prepare an attack on the queen side for white if white isn't counting pawns, right? If white's just tossing things forward, he can start his attack as soon as he wants. So Noah, I think, I mean, it feels like Noah's playing okay, and I don't like a5. I think a5 might not help Robert at all. But Noah still has some difficulties. His knight on d5 really can't move because of bishop e6. So, for example, if knight here, then bishop e6 is curtains. Which probably is the idea behind rook f6. Maybe allowing the knight to leave d5, but then it falls to that. And okay, that's interesting. Knight g3. Huh. What?
So you're telling me Robert Donahue made a draw in 18 moves?
Yeah, so what is the result here? Is it a draw?
I would assume so. I mean, it looks like they repeated in a roundabout way, but that doesn't sound
Yeah.
like Robert.
No, it doesn't sound like Robert. So maybe there's some because there's a
Maybe
oh,
I don't know.
there's a different game that says Donahue versus Stewart.
But that Eddie said that was actually the game, so I think we should assume that Robert and Noah was a draw. But I don't know.
Okay. And this one might have been John versus Michael Muff instead. Actually, the
Yes, I
opening
would assume
reminds
so. Yes.
okay. And the opening reminds me of okay, no, D4 was played, so it probably isn't Jacob because Jacob Pikus plays this sort of stuff, but he usually doesn't play the D4 pawn. I believe John Heyer can play this stuff as white, so okay. And this is all kind of theory, this business right here. Wow. Impressed.
It's like a GM game or something.
Yeah. Yeah, so let me go back a bit just to give a little bit of insight. So right here, after bishop d6, white transposes into a Catalan where the bishop on d6 is kind of weird, although semi-Slav players might play this bishop d6 with the idea of getting an early e5 in, which is what black is trying to do here. And so knight d2, which is kind of aimed against e5. And now we get this pawn move. So black wants to get active pieces and is willing to take on an IQP as the price of getting his pieces more active and more space. And so now we have the IQP on d5, but all of black's pieces are able to get to decent squares, and it's not clear who, if anyone, is better here. Although it comes down to your like personal chess preferences. Some people only want to play with the IQP, and some people only want to play against the IQP. And some, the really enlightened, which does not include me, are happy playing both sides of it. So here we have bishop e6 and the knight f3. This is a fun maneuver. So black is getting his pawns corrected momentarily, but then white immediately strikes at the center to give black a different IQP, a different isolated pawn. It may not necessarily be the queen's pawn. And so we get this, and so where black has to deal with white's bishop pair, and his pawn structure is a little bit worse with this guy being potentially weak. And then after this, it sets up a small tactic, petite combinaison, for white, based on the knight on e5 being a little bit loose. All right, so after all of that business and what looked like a GM game, now white is a pawn up, but in compensation, black's rooks are already ready to get active, and he can gain some tempi on white's queen. So he starts off with rook at f5, and then queen e3, retreating but counterattacking against a7. And so b6 happens, rook c1, and black has to go all out to create some sort of counter, otherwise that pawn is going to count. So he plays to double out the f file. And now we have a position where f4 is double-edged. On one hand, it keeps the e-pawn from moving forward. On the other hand, it does open some of the lines leading to his king. And with these major piece positions, it's once you play a move like f4, it might be difficult to keep those guys out. And then that increases the chances of some sort of drawing sequence or even a mating sequence. Or in this case, gifting back the pawn.
Wait. Yeah, I guess. Yeah, you have to go queen. Wait. Yeah, this is bad.
This is actually kind of a neat tactic in reply to white's earlier neat tactic. Let's see if it's working though. So yeah, it's working. Hence the draw. The idea being that if white tries to escape, say with this, then black can recapture and is a rook up. So white needs to keep in touch with the rook so that if black plays this, he can capture here, and now it's material even. And okay, maybe on a theoretical basis, white might be slightly better just because his pawn structure is a bit better, but this should probably end in a draw. So a draw seems like a fair. That looks like one of the a correct game in some ways, yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to refer to the players in any of these games as black and white because we don't know who they really are anymore. Because it's not clear if the labels are matching reality. Here we've got a Nimzo Indian with 4e3, and in response, black plays b6, which Fischer was fond of. In fact, I think it might even carry Fischer's name. This line, bishop d3, knight f3. There is an interesting gambit line here with knight e2, but that's for a different day. So knight f3. So now we're getting a fairly standard position. d6 is not the most standard here, but it's playable. But by playing this, black is basically committing to capturing on c3 with the bishop because he's just removed its escape. And that's another problem with an early d6 in these sort of positions where the bishop is hanging out on b4 is queen a4 checks. And it just so happens that because white's king is still on e1, black has a bailout bishop takes c3 so it doesn't lose a piece. But if there wasn't that move, then d5 would be winning material. White tries to sneak in the d5 idea by castling so that bishop takes c3 is no longer a check, and black correctly exchanges off bishop for knight. So now we have I suppose common pawn structure for the Nimzo-Indian with black still not castled, so he has to figure that out, and he does that on the next move, and now e4 happens. So black has the bishop and two knights versus two bishops and a knight, and he's dealing with a space disadvantage. So one of the first things he should be looking to do is, I think, finding some decent square for his knight and also looking for some target. He has to get his knights active and into good positions. Otherwise, given time, white will open things up for his bishops, and it won't be a happy ending for black. So he plays e5, getting a foothold in the center.
And by the way, this game is correct. It's between Eddie and Torfi.
Okay. So we have some strong players, which was evident from the way the open was played. And so here, Torfi does this interesting and I think good reorganization of his pieces. His knight wasn't helping out on c6, so he puts it on d7, where on one hand it's helping to defend its comrade on f6, and it's also allowing the bishop on b7 to see clearly now that e4 is a target. So rook e3, queen e6, and now I'm suspecting Torfi wants to expand on the king side, is the idea behind knight h7. It's double-edged because the center hasn't been settled yet, but maybe it doesn't hurt to prepare for it. And so a5 there, and now he plays g5. So the bridge has officially been burned.
Yeah, there's a lot of tactics here with pieces getting trapped.
Yeah. This is okay. So wow.
What do we have to play, like f6? If king h8, then Eddie still probably plays knight h6. Well, no, wait, knight h6 is just bad then, because
Yeah.
g5 is protected by the knight. Yeah. So king h8 maybe.
So I think king h8 looks like an idea. That was my first choice. Queen h5 looks interesting. Just going right ahead to take the bishop, being that f6 is double covered, so knight f6 checks aren't working.
Yeah, I don't see anything wrong with it.
Well, I guess maybe we'll find out, because Torfi was convinced to resign a move later. So what's going on here? Oh, huh? Okay, queen e4. So first of all, in this position, the queen's status is officially declared unsafe, because it's running out of squares, and so Torfi tries to beat a retreat with queen e4, but it's maybe not working. Oh my. So I guess Eddie found the weakness in that plan. So if queen here, then g4, and if queen here, then knight e7.
Funny finish.
But that's yikes. So let's go back, because that means that queen h4 was just too dangerous then, right?
Yeah.
Maybe this whole plan. So yeah, maybe we look at king h8 and what's white doing after that.
Yeah, queen h5 looked fine, but maybe it's a bit too greedy. If we play king h8, I mean, we're already attacking the piece. Why attack it again? Doesn't make much sense.
Well, no, it makes sense in that that he's an attack, but it can't be captured in this way, right? Because of after this and here.
True.
But and so he's probably trying to win it in a cleaner way. But and at this moment, it's not immediately clear that the queen is going to get trapped, right? But yeah, there's no rest for the weary here. Maybe queen f4. Wow, that's a harsh finish. All right. Well, I mean, can you find out where the improvement should be? I mean, maybe I guess king h8 probably is the way to go.
Yeah,
And
I think it's
you don't have to rush to take that piece. You can play other useful moves, and even if the piece escapes, it's escaping to g3, which I don't know is an ideal square.
So now what? So you have to move the knight to not lose the bishop. So you play like knight e3.
So maybe knight e3, and now knight f6. Because I want to get, well, even knight c5 actually. Maybe knight c5 is even better. I want to get this guy back. I want to get this guy to help cover f5.
Yeah. I think it's a scenario where black can never win the bishop because the queen is always going to be just slightly awkward. So I think white eventually will rook f3, bishop g3. So I think both sides need to just play a normal game from this point onward, but that didn't end up happening.
Yeah. Wow, that was rather rapid punishment for I don't know if it's too strong to refer to it as avarice, but let's see here. We got a French. Okay, this is one annoying line for me. This bishop d3. Okay. It seems like, so going back a bit, so White's idea in this line is basically he wants to put the bishop on the long diagonal without weakening his light squares on the king side, and makes it a bit more difficult for black to get his bishop into the game. And so black counterattacks in the center, white defends the center, and then we get this, and somehow bishop d7 feels like it might be slow. I don't know whether black has time to play pawn takes pawn and then knight e5. Maybe that's just too risky with the queen on b6, which maybe that's part of the issue, is that the queen coming to b6 might not be necessary. Maybe he captures here immediately, And if knight takes, then maybe there's knight here before bishop d7. That way your queen isn't left open to tempo shots or something. But
yeah, seems like white should always be slightly better just because of that d7 bishop.
yes,
Which
and
is why
so
my cautionary advice to everyone: don't play the French. It's a lousy
every
opening.
5 words.
It's super overrated. That's my advice.
Every 5 words right there. As an almost lifelong French player, I take affront to such words.
And I was too, but I'm changing my stance, and I think every round, okay, we need to have a hot take. So that's the hot
Yes,
take for this stream.
there you go. Yeah, this position is already difficult for Jeremy. I mean, white is already almost fully developed. He already has a lever with d4 with d5, and I'm sure he should be calculating it. If he wasn't, he should be calculating sorry, d5 to see if that's working or not. But maybe he did and came to the conclusion that developing the knight made even more sense. Just getting all his pieces in, and with the black king still in the center, bad things could be happening. Okay, well that's a different approach, and now all of a sudden the bishop's not bad on b5, and white's d4 pawn is in danger. Okay.
And then he takes
So
the knight. No, I don't know why he took the knight. Now white has the bishop pair, and it's a position where you probably. I mean, I guess the knight on d5 is good, but I don't know why he took on e2.
I think he took on e2 because he was fixing to take the pawn on d4, and then noticed that after bishop e2, taking the pawn on d4 means allowing this to happen.
Good point.
And no one wants that to happen if you're black.
Yeah, they lose a rook or a queen.
Say hello. And or maybe there's another one. Maybe there's
I guess knight f6. Yeah.
Yeah, let's see what the most what would be the most.
Maybe you don't lose material, but king e7, bishop f8, that's not so good.
Yeah. I think you don't have to rush it. Black's position is miserable enough without winning material. So that might have been why he captured, but then decided not to take, and instead chooses to go for development. Which, by the way, the pawn isn't running away, right? It's an isolated pawn, and maybe if black survives the middle game, he might be okay. At this point, there's also an argument in favor of maybe instead of bishop e7, maybe consider bishop b4, trying to induce white to allow the exchange of bishops. So then there's no bishop pair disadvantage.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable.
Bishop e7 might be a little bit compliant. So he does it anyway. And, well, maybe patience is a virtue because now he can do it in a way that white's rook is misplaced on a3. Okay, this doesn't make any sense. Is this supposed to be saying 0-1 rather than 1-0? Or did he actually lose on time? Oh, He actually lost on time.
Oh
Is this
wow.
for real?
Well, let's look at the time usage. Is anything really awkward? Well, not awkward, but like
Wait
irregular.
a second. Wait. That even makes less sense. White's clock is the one claiming it's out of time, and it's 1-0.
Yeah, it's been a goofy night.
So I don't know what's going on, but black is definitely better here, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I would agree.
So, all right, let's see what's going on in Eric versus Mitch. I'm wondering if this was also reversed because this D4 E3 business is more like um, a Norman Myron opening than an Eric Gallant opening.
Hmm.
Yeah, because Eric, I think, usually plays more D4, C4, or English ready type stuff than this business. It's just like somebody who's trying to set up for a Stonewall. And I know that Norman is a Stonewall guy. So I don't know if the names are mixed up on this one too.
I believe they are because earlier in the chat, and I hadn't mentioned this because I didn't know what game he was talking about, but I'm pretty sure it's not Eric and Mitch
And
because
Mitch.
yeah, because Eddie had said something. Um, the game was between Eric with white and Mitch was with black, but he said that like half an hour ago. So I don't know
Oh,
what. And I saw him say that. I just didn't know what game he was talking about, whether I saw the message a couple minutes too later. So I just decided not to say anything. But we can be confident that white is not who we think it is.
okay. Because yeah, this looks more like a Norman game. Just the beginning moves, I would say.
It's not guess the elo, it's guess the player now.
Yeah, right. Um, oh, okay. Nifty. Wow. And they simplify into an ending where white has a 2-on-1 on the queen side, black has a 4-on-3 on the king side. White's king is a bit more active, well, a lot more active, but is black to move, and black tries to bring his king to the center and create his wall on the king side. And yeah, it's hard to see if either player could penetrate here. Oh, that's a way of keeping things relatively close. I don't know if F5, no, F5 is not working. It's not working here. And so they go for repetition and Nietzsche. So, okay, that's a relatively clean game. Let me see, did we miss anything? They're entering some other games, it looks like. Or are these games from last week that they included into?
No, I think those should be tonight, like Brendan Furt, that should be tonight.
Okay.
It's up to you whether we pass on these because we've been going 2 hours and
Yeah, let's adjourn at this point.
yes, take it easy on the commentators.
Yes. Especially since it's harder to know when we're having to play guess the player every game.
Yeah,
Right.
we're straining our brains even more. But I guess so we'll be back for round 3 next week. And it will be a different commentary lineup. it'll be Chris and International Master Bear. So stay tuned for that. And then as always, we'll shout out our sponsors. That's Chess Goals and Matt Jensen with the opening courses that you can use the coupon code CASTLE to get 30% off of. So check that out. And then also Webeccentric, of course, you can use the discount code CASTLE for 15%. And Webeccentric, there's the merch store, but then there's Webeccentric, the business that's run by Johnny. And they're empowering small businesses and startups through tailored digital solutions. Webeccentric specializes in custom web development, cloud solutions, and digital strategy for small businesses. With over 25 years of experience, Webeccentric brings enterprise-level expertise to businesses of all sizes. We're here to help. Reach us at webeccentric.com, and then, of course, shop with them at shop.webeccentric.com. So pretty cool there.
Cool.
And
All right.
unless you have any closing words, I think we'll see you next week.
No, I think we'll see. I'll be grabbing my popcorn for next week and seeing the show that Chris and I Am New Bear put on.
Yeah. Well, all right, guys. Have